Alright, today we're dropping hot into the world of Battle Royale games. But we're not just here to spectate, we're gonna get under the hood and really dissect the design that makes these games so addictive, so chaotic, and yes, sometimes so frustrating. Let's get into it.
You know that feeling when you finally get that win and winner winner chicken dinner flashes on the screen? Was that all you? Pure skill? Or was it just a lucky break with the loot? Or is there something else going on? We're going to explore the hidden systems that are really pulling the strings in every single one of these massive digital brawls.
So first up, let's pull back the curtain. You know, the whole Battle Royale experience, it feels completely random, right? But the truth is, it's actually a super carefully engineered system. It's this delicate balancing act between what developers can predict and just pure, beautiful chaos. So if you really want to understand how these games work, you have to break them down into their core parts. You've got the economics that fund the whole thing, the mechanics of what you actually do in the game, and the psychology behind it all. We're going to start with the engine that makes it all possible, the money. And this leads us to a really fascinating question. Why do we as players spend millions and millions of real dollars on cosmetic items that give us absolutely zero competitive advantage? Well, the answer has nothing to do with function. It's all about how much we think they're worth. To really unpack this, researchers use a framework called the theory of consumption values. The basic idea is that when we decide to buy something, it's not just one thing pushing us. It's a whole cocktail of different influences. The specific situation we're in, the actual feelings an item gives us, and of course, whether we feel like we're getting a good deal. And this is what that looks like in practice. This is how researchers literally map out those psychological drivers. You can see on the left, you've got these different values like emotional or social. And the model shows how those things, when they're boosted by moderators like trendiness, flow all the way to the right and lead directly to that final click, that decision to buy. It's a blueprint of our own spending habits. So a bunch of different things are at play here. Conditional value? That's, buying that ridiculous holiday skin just for the month of December. Emotional value is all about how cool that glowing armor makes you feel. And customization? Well, that's just about showing the world who you are. But believe it or not, one of these factors is way more important than all the others. Yup, the data is pretty clear on this. The single most powerful reason we decide to buy an in-game item is trendiness. It's more important than how it looks, how much it costs, or what it does. The biggest driver is simply whether or not it's the hot new thing that everybody else wants. So, where does that trendiness come from? You guessed it, streamers. They're the new celebrities, the tastemakers of this whole world. When a huge streamer starts using a specific skin, they create a social event. They turn a bunch of pixels into a status symbol, and in doing so, they drive the entire in-game economy. Okay, so we've got the economy figured out. Now let's get to the real heart of the game, the mechanics. What are we actually doing minute by minute? And maybe more importantly, does what the developers are building actually line up with what players really want? Well, if you look at the data for what mechanics developers focus on, you see a pretty clear pattern. It's all about the basics of combat, aiming down sights or ADS and reloading. They're in pretty much every single game. This is the foundation, the core loop that developers are building. But then you ask the players what they think is most important, and the picture changes a lot. I mean, yeah, combat's important, but the mechanics that players rate the highest are all about movement, jumping, sprinting, crouching. Players, it turns out, are obsessed with fluid, agile control over their character. And this all points to this really interesting gap, right? Players are constantly asking for more complex ways to move around. Think vaulting over walls, grabbing ledges, and more tactical options like grenades you can cook. But at the same time, development often seems to double down on just refining that standard aim and shoot combat loop. this desire for mechanical perfection is so strong that players will literally re-engineer the game themselves. This little line of code from Counter-Strike, it creates something called a jump throw bind. It lets you execute a perfect grenade throw while jumping, something that's incredibly hard to do manually with a single button press. It's a perfect case of players building their own tools to achieve total mastery.
Okay, so we've got the economy that players buy into, and we've got the mechanics that they want to master. But there's this third huge element that defines every single match, and that's randomness. So, how much of that win really comes down to your skill, and how much is just a roll of the dice?
Well, to figure this out, researchers broke down that whole feeling of randomness in PUBG into 4 key questions. They asked, what has the biggest impact on whether you feel like you have a chance to win? Is it where you land, where the airdrop lands, where the circle decides to shrink, or is it how your weapon actually behaves in your hand?
And the results are fascinating. It's not about the loot you find on the ground. The 2 biggest things that make a game feel random and out of your control are unpredictable weapon recoil and that seemingly arbitrary shrinking circle. So, feeling like you got unlucky isn't about what you find. It's about not feeling in control of your tools and the world around you.
So now let's put it all together. What happens when these carefully designed systems, the economy, the mechanics, the randomness, what happens when they slam into the real world? Let's look at the raw, unfiltered, and often hilarious player response. Okay, here's a totally standard developer move. They look at their data, they see one gun, in this case the AUG, is just a little bit too good. So the logical, reasonable thing to do is to nerf it, to bring it down a peg and make the game more balanced. Makes sense, right? And then, here's the reality. For this player, that tiny data-driven balance change is seen as an absolute catastrophe. It has completely destroyed the weapon, and now an entire class of guns is worthless. This is the kind of passion and perception developers are dealing with every single day. Here's another one, and this one's a classic. In some patch notes, the developers said they were nerfing the reverse speed of vehicles. Why? Because, they said, players had pointed out that reversing into buildings was an overly powerful tactic. Again, sounds like they're just listening to feedback. This response just perfectly captures the disconnect. Here's a player with over 3,000 hours in the game, and he is completely baffled. He has never, not once, even seen this supposedly powerful tactic that the developers felt needed an urgent fix. It just shows how massive the gap can be between how a game is designed and how it's actually played. So after digging through the economics, the mechanics, and these huge perception gaps, what does it all mean for the future? Where are these massive virtual worlds actually headed? So what's the bottom line? Well, we've learned that in-game economies are really just social economies, driven by trends, not usefulness. We've seen there's a real gap between the complex movement players crave and what developers often prioritize. We've figured out that randomness is really about a feeling of control. And maybe most importantly, we've seen just how wildly developer intent can clash with player reality. And all this leaves us with one final, really big question. As developers get better and better at analyzing data and engineering these experiences, do they risk making them, I don't know, too perfect? Perfectly balanced but sterile and predictable? Or will understanding these deep systems actually let them create worlds that are even more compelling, more surprising, and more fun? It's something to think about on your next drop.